When bass and pike go on the active feed post-spawn, and then again in the fall when they leave their deeper schools, there are few presentations as effective as moving baits. High in that list are fast-moving baits with flash and minnow-like movements, such as spinnerbaits, chatterbaits, and swim jigs. I use these three styles of baits almost interchangeably when fish are living and feeding in shallow flats or weed beds. The idea is to use these baits to trigger the more aggressive fish. Once you cover an area with these baits, you can often circle back and work those areas with slower presentations to find the more reluctant biters as well. I really consider these three in the same class because I will opt for one of these baits in very similar circumstances and sometimes will cycle through them if I'm not getting bites. Let's break down each type of moving bait and when to use them. The OG is the spinnerbait. For decades, this has been the go-to search bait for bass fishermen and maybe second only to the daredevil for pike. This is arguably the most versatile of the three bait types we'll talk about today. The nature of the spinnerbait allows you to speed it up and ride it high in the water, brushing over the tops of thick weeds, and you can also slow it down to work through more scattered weeds and reed beds. I like to work this in a variety of ways depending on the mood of the fish and the makeup of the weed bed. Where possible, I'll slow it down with a pulsating retrieve to allow the spinner blades to slow and speed up and the skirt to flare. When fish are more aggressive, a straight faster retrieve will trigger bites, ideally hitting the tops of weeds occasionally. Many bites will come when popping off of a weed. Experiment with size, blade styles, and trailers to dial in what the fish are looking for. The hot new bait is the chatterbait or bladed jig. This is an inline presentation with a blade in the front of a jig head making a lot of noise and flash, similar to a spinnerbait, but in a more compact presentation. Popular baits include Z-Man jackhammers or Strike King thunder crickets. These are a little less weedless and require a little more constant retrieve. This presentation will not work well in the thicker weed beds, but it is ideal when working the edges of reed beds with sparser cabbage or coontail, or deeper cabbage beds when the fish are willing to come up to eat this fast-moving presentation. Tip your favorite chatterbait with a swim bait like a rage swimmer or craw-style trailer for a smaller profile. When I'm finding fish pushed further up into the reeds or in heavier weeds, I will opt for a swim bait with a weed guard. This lacks the flash and vibration of the other two options, but can be fished in areas that the other two can't quite fish as effectively. I'll target areas that I might come back with a bass jig later, but running a swim bait through these areas will pick off the more aggressive fish deep in the cover. I'll generally use a pretty straight, fast retrieve to trigger reactive bites, stopping and popping off weeds when necessary. I'll fish all of these baits on medium to medium light rods on braided line. I'll add a fluoro leader in clear water. I'll run either baitcaster or spinning rods depending on the cover and size of fish I'm targeting. When throwing swim jigs far into a reed bed for larger bass, I'll go with a heavier rod to ensure I can rip them out of that cover. If I'm fishing reed edges or deeper cabbage beds, I'll opt for a spinning rod, especially if I have to throw a lighter spinnerbait into a heavier wind. Use any of these three baits to cover water and search for active fish. Come back to the areas that you got the most bites and fish them slower to target those less aggressive fish in the same areas. Fishing these fast-moving search baits is a great way to learn a new body of water, covering lots of water quickly, and is a fun, easy way for novice anglers to catch fish. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and check out our other videos.